All right, so hi guys. A quick question for you. How much of your life do you think you spend sleeping? Just shout in your guesses. Just shout. Just shout a guess. One third. One third, yeah, that's right. I mean, now who has a very good bed at home? Just raise your hand. Very good, comfortable bed, spending a third of your life sleeping. All right, so like a lot of people. And this makes sense, because if you spend as much as a third of your life with something, of course you want to use the best equipment for it. Now, what else do we spend a third of our lives with? I can help you. It's related to debugging, pointless meetings, arguments about composition versus options API. Yeah, so it's work. And for the most of us here, it's development. But the thing is that in development, it's not always obvious what the best tool is. And let's take forms as an example. A form can be as simple as a single slider that lets you pick how much you want to spend on a hotel per night. But a form can also be a quite complicated one. Maybe a form with hundreds of fields that you have to fill in to get a personalized insurance offer. Now, if you ever struggled by using the same tool for both types of forms, you are likely missing out on the benefits that different tools can offer. Imagine that you start working on a new project and you get this design plan. And this design plan has a couple of forms. What's common about them is that they look completely different in different parts of the layout. This isn't because designers hate us, it's just that they want to have the best design that caters user experience. I like to call these type of forms UI-first forms. But the thing is that as developers, we like to think in terms of reusability. And it's very likely that we only have maybe just a single drop-down component that we have to customize and fit into the design and layout and match the design. So one thing that is very important for us in these cases is to be able to do these design customizations very easily. So if you are using a UI component library, like PrimeView or ViewStick or ShadCN or something similar, I think you are already doing it right. Why? Because those libraries are made to be very easily customizable design-wise. In fact, they are always experimenting with new ways how they can give you the most freedom in customizing things while keeping things reasonably reusable. Because as developers, we argue about a lot of things, but there's one thing I think we can all agree on, is that we want reusability without any kind of limitation or standing anything in our way, shipping things how we want. But unfortunately, this is not how it works, because tools are optimized for certain scenarios, which means they won't perform that well in others. Now, what about forms where the design customization is not the primary aspect, but we have to gather maybe a lot of data? I like to call these type of forms data-first forms. And in data-first forms, we can easily have hundreds of fields. And one thing that is very important for us in these cases is to be able to create these very large forms quickly and easily and simply. If we try to rely on the same tools as for the UI-first forms, like only our component libraries, we will likely get annoyed a bit. Why? Because we're going to have a ton of markup, and probably we're going to have to solve the same challenges over and over again. And as developers, we don't like repeating ourselves. So the question is there a better way of handling these type of forms? Especially because these forms can also introduce other common challenges, like how to handle nested data, how to break forms into multiple steps, and then how to have conditions and all that stuff. So you can probably see this coming, that I'm here to tell you that there is a better way to handle these type of forms. My name is Adam Berecz, and I created a form framework that aims to help you with this problem. And it's called Vueform. And Vueform has three main goals. The first is to make form development easy and simple so it increases your productivity. The second is to give you out-of-the-box solutions for common form-related challenges and problems so you don't have to solve them over and over again. So it increases your project scalability. And the third is to provide a common language for developers when it comes to dealing with forms, so it enhances collaboration. But let's see how it works. So after you install Vueform as a plugin in your project, you're going to have a couple of global components registered. And one of them is Vueform. Vueform is a wrapper for a Vueform, and we can place elements into it. Vueform comes with a couple of form elements like tags, sliders, date pickers, and it has some more advanced ones like matrices, location selectors, signature, and so on. So what's common about them is that all of them are available in the open source library, and they are free to use for everyone. And this is how you can add them to your forms. In this case, there's a name as a text element, there's a rich text editor for the bio, and there is a slider for the height. But of course, these are too generic, and you want to customize these elements, so you define properties. You can add, for example, a label, or define how many columns it should take up in a row, or define validation rules. But you can do a bit more advanced stuff, like adding conditions to it. In this case, this password element is only going to be part of the form if the user indicated that they want to create an account by checking that checkbox. But we can use conditions for other things, like making an element conditionally required, or read-only, or disabled, and so on. Yeah, here's the next example. Imagine that you work on a blog engine, and you have to allow your users to create articles in multiple languages at the same time. In Vueform, what you can do is prefix certain elements with a T, indicating that they should be translatable, and add the multilingual tag to the Vueform component. And the result of that is this: a form that has a language selector, and user can switch between them and fill in all the field values in different languages. Now, when the form gets submitted, each field is going to have an object value where each language will have its own different content. Yeah, the next example is about selects. And select is the most versatile component of Vueform, and it has some very cool features that can make your life much easier. So let's see what are those. This is one way you can define options for your select. So this is a list of users. But usually we don't store the users on the front end, right? What we likely want to do is load them from an API. So we can also pass an API endpoint for the items. So the options will be dynamically loaded from there. But we can take this one step further. Let's say that we have a country selector, and we know that usually it comes with a state selector. But we know that states are not for all the countries, but now just to keep things simple, let's say that they're only for US and Australia. So we add conditions to it. And the next thing we have to do is add the dynamic query param to the states endpoint, because we have to know which states should we load, right? So we add the country that points to another element in our form. And we can take this one step further, and we can add the city selector that will depend on the state and the country as well. And the result of that is this. First, you can see that there's only a country and a city. And if you choose, for example, United States, the state appears, you choose that, and the cities will be loaded according to that. All right, last example here. So let's say that you have two fields. And first is the input field, and the second should show some kind of a calculated value of the first input field. One way to tackle that in Vueform is by subscribing to the change event of the first input. And by this, we have access to this element, or L param. And this is basically the view component of the text element itself. And this means that we have access to all of its properties and methods. And one property that each Vueform element has, it's form. And a form is basically the parent, the wrapping Vueform component, which happens to have an L method that gives us access to all the other elements in our form. And in this case, we can use the output element to update its value with our current value times 2. And this is how it looks in action. One way to approach this problem is by using a static element. Static elements in Vueform can contain string, HTML, or even other components. And what's cool about them is that they also have access to this L property. And the same way, it can give access to all the other elements in our form. And in this case, we can reach our input field and display its value times 2 as the value for the static element. Yeah. I mean, those are just two very simple examples, but I just wanted to demonstrate like what kind of freedom you can have, and you know, when you're doing custom components in your system, which is very likely the case, these kind of features can give you like complete freedom and very high level of flexibility. But this is just the tip of the iceberg. I'm sure there are many experienced developers in here now thinking that, okay, this is nice, but what happens in edge cases? Will Vueform ever stand in my way and I have to do crazy workarounds just to get some stuff done? Well, when designing Vueform, one of my main goals was trying to make sure that this never happens. Vueform is created in a way that you can customize, extend, or even replace any part of it using a progressive approach. But what does it mean? First of all, Vueform has almost 400 CSS variables. And this lets you customize basic things like colors, borders, spacing, fonts, and so on. But each component, each DOM part of each component has also have a named class, which gives you the freedom to manipulate the classes of all the components in Vueform. Or you can use alternative templates, which is basically you have the one business logic for a component, but you can assign multiple templates to it, and you can choose between them at runtime. Or you can write plugins to extend the business logic side of things. Or you can create custom elements, of course. Maybe you want to include a third-party plugin or a tiny MC editor or something custom that you have in your company. All right, but now let's move back to the topic of form creation a bit. I already showed you that this is one way how you can create forms in Vueform. But there's another way. And that's by defining an object of elements that you pass as a schema for the Vueform. But if we can do this, we can also do this. We can use a single object to define all the properties of Vueform and use vbind to assign all of them to it. In this example, I used almost everything that I showed you before, like translatable elements, conditions, async options, and so on. So the point of Vueform providing these features out of the box is not only to save you time, but also this: to be able to add advanced features to your form using only a single object, so you're still able to serialize it. Serialization is the process of converting data into a transferable state that can be reconstructed later. In other words, we can use a simple JSON to store forms with complex logic. This allows us to define forms with almost human terms. I want an input if X is selected. I want to load my options from this endpoint. Or I want to have a form with X steps. Because data-first forms can be very often defined like this. It's not like you need a custom-looking email or birthday input in a job application or insurance application form, right? We usually don't even get designs for these type of forms. We just say that, okay, gather this data. Now, if people who aren't actual developers are defining these requirements for these forms, our boss, our client, our PM, or PO, we are just the hand that creates these forms, and it's boring. If you are using Vueform, probably you're already at the more productive side of things. But wouldn't it be great if you were only needed for maybe the actual 10% of the things that needs your valuable development skills? And maybe instead of receiving written requirements from your PM, you would get a 90% ready form without too much effort on their end. Well, Vueform comes with a drag-and-drop form builder, and this is just one case it can help you with. You can start using the builder without knowing anything about Vueform, and basically you can produce the same output. It can be used to speed up the work of the development team, to enable anyone to create complex forms without coding knowledge, or to let the actual users of your applications to create forms dynamically. And I think it's the best if I show you it in action. Okay, you can see this. That's great. Let's zoom in a bit. Okay, looks good. So this is the builder. And so what's important to know about this is that basically everything you see here is just an interface to the features that the open source library provides. And so if somebody starts building a form with this, it can have the exact same output as if it was created by a developer. So in this demo, which will be just a couple of minutes, I will try to show you some of the features of the builder and build a simple registration form. So to get started, I will use the AI assistant if I have internet, and I already created a prompt that says create a form with the following fields: first name, last name, email, and password. And so let's generate this form. Okay, it's done. We don't need this title, we don't need this button now, and I want to move this last name next to the first name. So I will have a form with multiple steps. So I will drag in the steps component and add 4 steps. The first is going to be account details, the second is going to be profile, third is to-dos, and the fourth is schedule. All right. So we already have the account details, and for the profile I need a rich text editor, I need a text input, and I need a gallery. Okay. Let's rename this editor to bio, the text input to hobbies, but I don't want this text input to have, like fixed options. So I will go to the data and remove this single option from here. And instead of that, I will check this allow new option. So the users can dynamically create new tags while typing. And the gallery seems fine. So for the to-do, I want to enable the user to create a list of to-dos and set whether they are ready or not. And for this, I will use the nested list component, which can accept any kind of other component, and everything you put inside, the user can repeat, like create multiple instances of it. So let's drag in here a text input, and let's call this to-do. Set a placeholder. Yeah, now let's add a radio tabs. This will be the ready state.
Se nota muy intuitivo.
0
Queda muy bien como
should be no, the 1 should be yes, and by default this should be no. Let's resize it a bit. And now I will go ahead and disable this to-do field, but only if, so I will set a condition when it should be disabled. It should only be disabled if the ready on the same level is equal to yes. Let's add some headers here, so that it's easier for the user to understand what they have here. So on the left column we have to-do, and on the right we have ready. Okay. And now for the schedule, I want to have a small timetable. And for this, I will use this grid component. The grid component in Vueform, with the grid component you can create any kind of structure that you can create in CSS grid. You can add columns, rows, you can merge cells if you want to, you can drag in elements, so you can do a lot of cool stuff with it. Right now I need 4 columns and 2 rows, and I will add some labels here. So this will be morning, afternoon, evening, and available. Okay. Now I need a select input. And with this select, what I will do is that I will rename this to yes, no, because all this select will do is let you choose between 2 options. For 0 it will be no, for 1 it will be yes. And I will place this select into these fields, so the user can indicate if they are available in the morning, afternoon, or evening. And now instead of cloning this element, I will go ahead and create a new custom element type on the fly. So let's call this yes, no. This is a yes, no element. And you can see that a new category appears here with a custom element. So I will drag this one first, and then I will create the new element, add the new element type here. Now what's left is to do some styling. First, I will align this to the center, make it bold.
O sea que imagínate la dificultad de mantenerlo porque es súper. tipo de
Looking
cosas.
good.
Es súper
And change
dinámico.
this grids layout
Se te puede
to
ir
something that
fácilmente.
looks a bit more like a spreadsheet, so table, and let's set column headers and row headers. Okay. So talking about theming, we have a theme panel, and do you remember that I told you about the 400 CSS variables that Vueform has? Now all of them has an input field here on the theme panel, and we can customize things like the primary color here.
Ahí está, lo
Or
que tú decías.
we can go to the theme panel, to the input section, and
Trabajo.
say that this radius, the border radius of the input shouldn't be 4, but should be 20. So now you get a fully rounded inputs. What we could do here is just go to the preview mode and start playing with this form, and you could see the data model on the side. But now to speed things up a little bit, let's just switch to the code view. Let's make sure that we export all the CSS variables and just copy this as a single file component. And I already prepared a test project for this. So let's look for this file. This is the registration form. And yes, here we have it. And now we have a form that has validation, it has rich text editor, has dynamic text input, multi-file uploads, has dynamic to-dos with nesting, repeating elements, chained with conditions, and a custom spreadsheet with our custom select input. Yeah. And the thing is that you cannot only export this as a single file component. Of course, this form can be represented as a JSON. So if you open this tab, you can see a full JSON representation of this form, which means you can copy this, you can import it back, and restore that state. Of course, we have dark mode. There are also different languages. You can define any other language if you need to.
Así cuando sabe los clientes
And
que
the whole
tiene.
builder is accessible, so means you can navigate
Para que soporte el
keyboard
japonés
and
si
doing
no
most
tienes
of the
que ir en
stuff,
japonés.
like probably all
Sueco.
the stuff here, like moving
Sueco.
elements and so on. Yeah, only using keyboard.
Tenía húngaro también.
So I think, yeah, this is about it with the demo. And if you want to, you can go to builder.vueform.com and try it out yourself. It's free to use for everyone on the online version. But the form builder can also be integrated into projects. Now when it's integrated, the users of those applications will create forms, and you can export these forms as JSON and store them in your database. And later you can load them back in, or you can decide to render them using the open source renderer. And users will fill in those forms, and you can store the data for those forms as well. So this way, Vueform Builder can be integrated into any application and workflow while giving you full control over the data. And you don't need to rely on any kind of third-party provider for handling your data. And of course, it can be customized. You can change, for example, its layout, turn on and off features, reorganize panels, create custom elements and categories, or define custom configuration options, and of course, tweak the branding. Now, this integrable version of Vueform Builder is a paid product, and this is how Vueform sustains itself. So if somebody is integrating the builder in their project, they are also supporting the open source part of Vueform. And yes, basically, this is my answer to monetization from open source from the talk earlier. Yeah. And this is about it. I see a long road ahead of me with Vueform because I see a lot of more exciting challenges that it can solve. And of course, I'm always open to new ideas. In fact, I created Vueform in a way, the GitHub, I set up GitHub in a way that everybody can throw in new ideas or upload other ideas. And I actually take these into account when planning new features. So if you want to support my work, there's something even more helpful that you can do than sponsoring me on GitHub. If you know anyone who could actually make use and gain value by using this builder in their project, the best thing you can do for me is just let them know about it. This is about it. Thank you very much for listening, and enjoy the rest of the day.